papers I have to show, cause I am a Jamaican. No matter where in this world I go, I am a Jamaican. No birth papers I have to show, cause I am a Jamaican. I have Jamaican walk, them here Jamaican talk, cause I am a Jamaican. Them here Jamaican chat, them say Jamaican bop, cause I am a Jamaican.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. This is More 91.7 FM, the station that drives strong community energy.
I will have to
We
show.
have a great interview lined up for you this evening, and it's all happening right here on your airwaves. So you got to get ready for this one.
Jamaican. When they see the Rasta man from Jamdong, that is a Jamaican. Dressmaker, baker, tailor, shoemaker, market woman in a donkey cart, rivers and
So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the airwaves of our great station 91.7, Miss Jeanelle Brown. How are you, Miss Jeanelle? Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I am good today. Very much good and happy to be here. Thank you for
Awesome,
having me on.
awesome. Welcome to our More FM business session. And Janelle, it's a pleasure hearing from you this evening. And I know you have a lot to unpack for us this evening as we delve right into what is it about Jamaicans? One cocoa always full the basket. And if you know a true Jamaican entrepreneur, you know that once they start making stuff and they think about going into the overseas market, it's all about having a vision for something else. So it is my pleasure when I heard about you, Miss Janelle Brown, Senior Export Facilitator at JamPro. And I want you to help our listeners to unpack what's happening right here. So I'm going to turn the microphone all over to you as you tell us a little bit more about what happened at the recent Jamaica Business Development Corporate Visual Biz Zone webinar, where you encouraged the micro, small business, and medium sized entrepreneurs to do something you call do the math, right? And I want for you to help us with this. What is exactly should our exporters, maybe those who are already in the market, those who are thinking about it, what exactly should they delve into? What exactly should they look forward to? Over to you, Miss Brown.
Okay, so recently I would have conducted a session through the JBDC on preparing for exports. And of course, as you rightfully say, a lot of entrepreneurs or small and medium sized businesses, they get really excited when they know they have a product that they're proud of. It's Jamaican made, and as Jamaicans, we're very proud of our work and
Definitely.
very quick to boast that this is a Jamaican made product. So when we get to the point of sending our products into an overseas market, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of calculations, a lot of research that's also needed to really drive the success behind an
Mhm.
initiative like that. And that session was really just to break it down for entrepreneurs and MSMEs in terms of what are some of the things that you need to ask yourself before you venture into this ambitious goal of exporting. In this session, we kind of broke it down from the analogy of two persons, two travelers that are going into a new market for the first time as travelers. One prepared 6 months in advance, and the other was just going, on a whim. And we kind of use that analogy to drive home the points that there are some things, some steps, and some questions that you need to take And those questions cover what we call 6 pillars of exports to really assess whether you and your products are ready for an export market.
Mm.
And just to briefly touch on those 6 topics, we go into export planning,
Uh-huh.
financial readiness, which of course covered, doing the math,
Yes.
certification readiness, product and market readiness, production and operation readiness, and human resource readiness. So the session really covered those 6 pillars and the different questions that any entrepreneur needs to ask themselves properly before sending those products into that market.
This sounds like a whole new thing to a lot of persons, and we might be doing some of those, but not as how you explained it. Um, for
Mhm.
those MSMEs that you have worked with, and for our listeners who are hearing MSMEs, that's the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. So you have worked with a lot of persons, a lot of entities. For those 6 pillars, which of those do we need to pay close attention to? Hope you're not saying all.
Wow, that's a good question. Because being on this side of things, I would say all of them need equal attention. But if I'm supposed to really single out an area based on conversations that
Yeah.
we've had with businesses who are preparing for exports, I
Hmm.
would say the planning stage,
Yeah.
because it really kind of encompasses the other stages. Because in planning for export, you would need to cover those other areas as well. So once you have that plan, it acts as a guide, it acts as a roadmap, it acts as a what happens if this scenario plays out. And it kind of helps you to assess whether or not you will be profitable and at what point of the journey you
Hmm.
begin to really see the success behind the actions that you're putting into getting your products overseas. And in preparing and doing the research, it also helps you to really plan for the different things that can happen along the way that can be very costly sometimes for small businesses.
Hmm.
And it really helps you to really think about a lot of the things that a lot of persons don't usually think about when they're going into an export market. So I would say emphasis definitely on the export planning
And the
stage, which is the
planning.
first stage.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs ourselves, we're all about making the extra dollar. But sometimes we are not so much concerned about what are the back end costs, because sometimes those back end
Right.
costs, those overhead, they creep in, and we are not putting those into play. Sometimes I hear a person saying, you need
Mhm.
to have a miscellaneous involved because what if
Right.
situations. So sometimes we tend to forget those. But what can you tell our listeners this evening, who are thinking about export marketing, those who have already started, um, apart from the planning, which they might need to go back to, what else is there available that they can help to navigate themselves through this?
Okay, so I'm happy you asked that because you are correct. And if you don't have a plan in place and you just gotten up today and decided, well, I have some extra products or I just want to venture and see what happens, you will get hit with some very expensive surprise costs when
Mm,
it comes to shipping, especially when it comes to certification, which a lot of markets require, um, and just the different things that can hit you in terms of promoting your product, because a lot of persons just think once you get in contact with a buyer and your products are on a shelf in a foreign market, that's all that needs to happen and the customers just need to come in and buy it. But one of the things that we touched on in the session is really looking at some of the products that are in our local market that aren't Jamaican products and how we know about those products. And the emphasis there was really on the spend. What does it take to get persons to know your brand and know your product in a market that nobody knows you?
Mm-hmm.
right? There, you are entering this market for the first time with the ambitious goal of making a profit, but so has a lot of other products from other markets, and you're competing as well with products that are produced in that market locally. So you have to think about what it's gonna cost you to get it there, as well as to get your name and your brand and your product seen and known by persons in that market. So in terms of, the one cocoa and, wanting to make that buck, you
Yeah.
have to really think about how much it costs you to make the product,
Yeah.
what it's going to cost you to move the product into the market, and what it's going to cost you to get your product seen and known. So
Yeah.
those are some of the considerations that we don't usually put calculations on, but they're very important because it really does make or break the success of your product in that market, especially if you're aware of the prices before you can then make a decision to say, do I enter now or do I need funding? Do
Right.
I go ahead now, or is it not going to be profitable enough in the long run for me to do this? Do I need to consider a different market instead? So those are some of the calculations that persons really need to look at, not just how much it is to make the product, but how
Mm-hmm.
much is it for the overall process of sending your product into a new market.
That's that's quite a mouthful. I hope our listeners and our visionaries are not getting the cold feet to say, you know what, I'm not going to,
No, no,
because
yes,
we do have persons who want to give up at the very hint that there's going to be a roadblock in the way. But I know you have something up your sleeve. I know you have some good words for us,
yes.
something that you can give us, some practical tips that you can give our MSMEs to help them, and if there's any incentives that persons can benefit from.
Okay, so you're touching on a lot of things, exciting things that we love to talk about here at Jamfro,
Right,
because
right
one
ahead.
of the things that, as much as we're giving you the information, is not to deter you from entering the market. It's
Mhm.
really just to see, have you assessed the gap? And one of the things that we do help here with at Jampro in terms of export readiness is an assessment of those gaps. So we have a tool that's hosted on our website called Export Readiness Checker. That checker really is like a survey that you can go through and answer as accurately as possible, and expands all of the areas that I would have spoken of, the 6 pillars, to really assess where you are currently on that journey with the ambitions that you have. Usually, by the end of it, you get a score and you kind of know where you fall. And then we here at Jamper can assess what are the needs that you have to close those gaps. And then we give you information to help you close those gaps. So that's one of the things that can definitely help, if you find yourself in a situation where you want to export and you realize maybe you're not so ready or you're not really sure if you're ready. You can always utilize the export readiness checker, which is a very useful tool in assessing readiness. And as I said, we guide you along the way in terms of closing the readiness gaps. Another thing that, we have information sessions every now and again, which is usually about 2 for the year,
Mhm.
um, that really cater to the need of giving information that's vital to persons who are looking and wanting to export. And we have an information session coming up on the 1st of September.
Hmm.
It's a face-to-face session that you have to register, but registration is free. And once you register for that event, it's called Digital Tools for Exporters. You will be engaged with what it is that you can utilize to do the market research, what it is that you can use to find buyers in the market, what you can use to advertise your products or leverage social media to get your products and your brand out there in the international market. And then, we'll be featuring tools in terms of payment processes. How do you collect payments from international clients? How do you manage the sales with the systems that you have, or your inventory? So those are some of the things that, we try to feature in terms of information and bridging the gap with exporters or persons who want to export. And of course, you can always call Jampro You can call our office or send us an email at info@dobusinessjamaica.com. And whatever the inquiry is about the export process, we will find a way to connect with you and answer those questions, because we do recognize that persons are at different stages along the continuum in terms of their journey. And some persons might need to know, the overall process. Some persons might have an idea of what the process is, and maybe they don't know about the incentives, like you mentioned, the PIR. And of
Okay.
course, we can always give you the necessary information there.
I see.
But I know you asked specifically about the PIR, which is really a government incentive that helps
Mhm.
producers, manufacturers, and producers to lower their costs to produce products. So if it is that you have a business and you're making, for example, soap, or you're making pepper sauce, but you have some packaging material or some ingredients that you need to import from another country.
Mhm.
Once you are approved for manufacturing status,
Right.
or you're a registered farmer, you can apply for those incentives, and you have certain benefits in terms of duty-free entry for those items that you're going to be using to
Mhm.
manufacture your products or in your production process. And that, of course, brings down the cost to produce it overall. So those are some of the benefits that persons also can utilize when you're thinking about sending their products overseas, because a lower cost
Mhm.
help to give you a more competitive price once you get to another market.
So there is definitely a plus for persons who contact Jampro, right? And persons who are thinking of exporting their products. But what we're trying to get persons to understand this evening is that you have to plan. You have to make sure that you go through the right channels for you to get proper information, because it's very hard when you have to pay to correct a mistake.
Mhm.
That's very expensive, right?
Very,
And so we want,
very,
so Miss Brown,
especially in logistics.
especially when we talk about shipment delay and all of that, meeting the demands of the supplier, that's another ball game, Miss Brown. And we want to make sure that our persons who are coming into this field, they are quite knowledgeable and know exactly what to do.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
There's one other thing that I would love to ask you. And what's your honest opinion on this? Does overseas
Okay.
marketing make financial sense?
It does.
Why?
Point blank, it does.
Okay.
Because again, I'm going to use an analogy that I would have used in a session conducted recently. If you
Mhm,
think about some of the brands in our local market that are not Jamaican, and
mhm.
I'll name, I don't know if I can name, but some of the snacks, a lot
Yes,
of the
yes.
snacks that we
That's
think are
it.
Jamaican that are
Right.
not manufactured in Jamaica, how do we know
Okay.
about them? I mean, I asked persons in the session, how do
Yeah.
you know about those products with the name brands that you named? Do
Mhm.
they have a facility, a manufacturing facility in Jamaica? Most of them don't. But it
Oh.
meant that they would have spent some money to ensure that we as Jamaicans know the products that they have in our market. And they've done it so well that we think some of those products are Jamaican.
Yeah.
So in the same way, we as exporters have to think about what that spend in the market. It might sound daunting, but it's something that we want exporters or persons planning to export to be very aware of, because when you do it right, you can be so successful in the market, just as any of those other brands that are currently in our market are doing. You have to put some money behind the activation, because if you're selling food, for example,
Mhm,
a new customer in that market might not just go on the shelf and take up the product, because they don't know what it smells like, they don't know what it look
mhm.
like outside of the bottle, they don't know what it tastes like, they don't know if it's gonna be something they like or not. And then worse, it's not a national product for them. it's an export product.
Right.
So, you have to set up means such as in-store sampling, so persons can say, okay, this is how it tastes when I put it with this food or that food. And then they can kind of gauge it and say, okay, I'm going to take this product, I'm going to try this product, I'm going to spread the word about this product. But, those are some of the things that you really need to consider when exporting, because the promotion and the marketing of your brand and your products in a market that's most likely bigger than Jamaica
Mhm.
is very important.
Um, I'm glad you mentioned that too, Miss Brown. And there's also something else I'd like to add to what you said. The pricing of the item is something that we also should take into consideration too, because it's going into a new market. So we have to make sure that it's at a comfortable price to the consumer. So, something that
Right.
persons can afford readily, you might have, and all depends on the target audience that you're looking forward to as well. Who are we targeting? Are we? So those are some things that we also
Hmm.
have to look forward to in terms of pricing and so forth. All right. So you did mention that there is a webinar coming up September 1,
Yes.
and that's digital tools for persons who are
Export.
exporters. And is there anything else that is any other upcoming events that you want to mention, or any other function that Jampro is promoting at this moment?
Okay, so it's just one correction. It's not a webinar, it's actually a face to face session.
All right.
So, you have to register. And as I said, registration is free and it's on the 1st of September. You can either call us, send us an email, or engage us on social media, Instagram, in order to access the registration form. In terms of other things that Jampro has, because we always have things coming up. We do inward and outward missions, and we also have, of course, the Expo, Jamaica Expo, coming up next year. And of course, the local manufacturers usually benefit from this event as well, because it's a medium for them to also, engage and get connected with buyers who are coming from overseas to find products, Jamaican products. So that's another um, event that we encourage persons to get on board with. So that's Expo Jamaica, as well as the upcoming information session on digital tools for exporters on September 1.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Brown. We could sit here all evening and have this conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to say to our listeners this evening on More 91.7 FM about, not only maybe about overseas engagement in the market, but anything else that MSMEs could benefit from? Any other final words before we go?
Um, any other final words? Yes. I would always say don't be daunted. As small as you think your product is, it can be very impactful. You
Mhm.
just have to continue to put in the research and do the necessary due diligence. Don't think that you're too small to make a big impact with your product. Just
Right.
reach out to the relevant agencies. We have several agencies under the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce that help to support MSMEs on the journey, whether it's to sell your products locally or overseas. So just continue to put in the work. Don't be daunted by anything. Get Brand Jamaica going, and just have those dreams and those plans to back those dreams up and go forward with it. Yes,
Awesome,
that's
awesome,
all I
awesome
have to
one.
say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miss Jeanelle Brown, Senior Officer in the at Jampro, Senior Export Facilitator Officer. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We know that this is not going to be the last, so we'd definitely love to hear from you as time progresses. And thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us this evening and for sharing with our MSMEs and other interested persons about overseas marketing. Thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good one.
You too. And thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye bye. So there you hear it from Miss Jeanelle Brown from Jam Pro. So if you are quite familiar with Jam Pro, you will know that they're definitely in the business of getting persons, getting entrepreneurs, promoting their information, promoting their products. And this is how we say tata for now. This is More FM business session just for you, planned for you, and we want you to have a great evening. Stand by at 5 p.m. for Disability Beyond Borders. This is More 91.